This couple expresses their urge for a child and they were both ecstatic about it. After a few months, the wife named Madeline is expecting a child, and there are only a few days left for the baby to come. Madeline used to take the fertility drug because she had some issues with conceiving. Her mother-in-law's behavior was rude to her. The reason was that she wanted to keep Madeline under her control. But Madeline was not willing for it and she used to dislike her. Her mother-in-law used to say, "Have an appointment with my suggested doctor." But Madeline was not satisfied with that doctor because she thinks that doctor is not taking her condition seriously. Both decide to contact the nurse midwife rather than go to the hospital. Nurse midwives used to be considered trained health professionals. They were hired to take care of the expectant ladies. They are not doctors by profession, which irritates Madeline's mother-in-law. She says to her, "You must visit the hospital in this critical condition." Despite this, she hires a nurse midwife. Her husband also asks her to rethink it. But Madeline convinces him by saying nothing will happen. The nurse midwife explains to them that she is trained in her profession, don't worry, and they will both face any issue. And the baby will be conceived easily. They had a pet cat in their house which used to hunt the rats a lot. They never liked it because the cat always has eatables other than mice. Once upon a time, Madeline suffered pain in her chest after dinner. Being worried, her husband brings her to the hospital. The doctor who treats her is familiar with her mother-in-law. Madeline does not consider him good, and the same case is with her husband coincidentally. They forbid the doctor to treat her, but he does not agree. Here Madeline's husband contacts a nurse midwife. Here it is also exposed that Madeline's mother-in-law had much hatred that she could get Madeline killed. Madeline used to keep herself away from her, having little idea about it. Anyhow, the nurse midwife comes to the hospital after her husband's call and says to the doctor, "She is my patient. Please, don't cure her." Madeline and her husband are driving off to their house at night. Unfortunately, an accident occurred with them. In the accident, her husband loses his life all of a sudden. Madeline had also lost some blood there. She is wounded enough that she is unable to get it. How can it happen? She contacts that nurse midwife for help who is treating her. She brings her to her house, but she was unable to treat her properly, so it was essential to take her to the hospital. Her condition was worsening, but Madeline herself was not willing to go to the hospital. Being professional, the nurse midwife had known that Madeline's unborn baby had also died in that accident. Madeline was breathing with the dead baby because she did not know about it, but the nurse midwife keeps it secret before Madeline because she had got this good news after a long time. Now she had also lost her husband. A few days were left after the baby's birth and Madeline yearned to see her baby with her own eyes. In the next scene, after suffering severe pain, the baby is delivered with a difficulty by Madeline. The nurse midwife starts weeping seeing it because the baby was already dead. Taking in her lap, Madeline says to her baby, "Please come back." Out of nowhere, life returns to that baby. Taking it incredible, the nurse midwife is left shocked. Madeline smiles, having a look at her baby, and names her Grace. That nurse midwife is thinking it strange because she was aware that the baby was dead many days ago. So she suggests to Madeline, "You must visit the hospital. Have a medical test for yours and your baby." Madeline does not ask for help from her mother-in-law while disagreeing with it. Now the story turns out a few months later when Madeline was fostering her baby living at her house. On the other side, her mother-in-law was very disturbed and dejected after losing her son. More hatred had taken place in her heart for Madeline. She was mentally disturbed at the loss of her son. So she wanted to bring her granddaughter to her. Being stressed, she struggles to get her granddaughter. Contrarily, Madeline comes into the scene that was gone feeble-minded. Further, she is brushing Grace's hair. Her hair is damaged in the hairbrush because she is lost at this time. As a result, Grace's head is wounded. She also injures Grace while showering her. Strangely, there were always flies around Grace. Madeline used to disgust with it but could not control them. A fly also goes into the nostrils of Grace. The next day, Madeline arranges a net around Grace to protect her from the flies. But flies were still surprisingly moving around her. And they were flying over her. On a coming day, Madeline also sealed the windows. Grace's movements were strange and she was fed by her mother, but it was indigestible to her. She always vomits after she breastfeed. Madeline had started to be worried about Grace because she had not been fed for many days. She had an assistant through whom she used to send messages to the nurse midwife because she was her only friend of Madeline. The nurse midwife is also unable to help her because Madeline's assistant was not conveying her messages to her. On the other side, Madeline's mother-in-law was conspiring to snatch her granddaughter from her. She was terrified that if she went to the hospital, the doctors would kidnap her daughter Grace. Being afraid, she used to keep herself in her house throughout the day and night. After a time, Madeline notices that Grace is harming her instead of feeding and she sucks blood. Madeline observes it but ignores it because she had affection for her daughter and she did not want to lose her, so she let her suck her blood instead of milk. It was clear before her that Grace is not behaving like a normal baby. It is seen later that Grace has a very bad odor. That bad odor continued to come even though Madeline bathed her many times. And flies will also not leave her. While shopping in the mall, she sees raw meat. And after witnessing blood on it, she decides to buy it to squeeze blood out of it, so Grace can drink that blood. Coming home, she wrings all blood from the raw meat and fills the feeder with it. But after drinking that blood, Grace behaves mysteriously. She again starts vomiting because her stomach cannot handle the animal's blood. Madeline understands that Grace can only drink human blood, but after not having any source of it, she had started to fall ill. She could not reveal this secret to anyone because after knowing it, either they will take Grace into their custody or kill her. She observes that her pet cat was bringing the dead rats for Grace. It seems that the cat also knows about Grace as she wants to take blood. Contrarily, Madeline's mother-in-law is conspiring to snatch her granddaughter soon from her. She talks to a doctor regarding it and says to him, "Prove Madeline is mentally sick." As a result, Madeline will go to the mental hospital and she can have custody of her granddaughter. Madeline was gradually weakening and even she had no clear vision now. She used to shiver and stumble. The next day, the same doctor visits her house to prove her mad. Her current condition was witnessing her sickness and she asks help from the doctor without revealing her wounds and Grace. Injecting Madeline, the doctor hears the frightful sound of Grace when she starts weeping. The doctor feels scared hearing the frightful sound of a baby. And he goes to check on Grace despite her unwillingness of Madeline. Meanwhile, Madeline strikes his head, and the doctor is fallen. She suddenly thinks she may give the blood of this doctor to Grace. Tearing his body with scissors, she fills the feeder with his blood. At the time of feeding Grace with this blood, she gets happy and enjoys it pleasurably. Madeline hides the dead body of the doctor in the lavatory. Now the situation had gone worse and she was lost in the love of her daughter. On the other side, her mother-in-law is doing preparations for her granddaughter. She had also decorated the child's room and arranged a feeder for her. She was sure that the doctor will fulfill her assigned task and that she will be able to attain her granddaughter. Then she goes to Madeline's house when the doctor does not come back after a long time. At that time, Madeline was engaged to dispose of the dead body of the doctor. Coming there, mother-in-law picks a hammer and Grace. Coming back, Madeline does not find Grace at her place. She glimpses her mother-in-law on the stairs who is going while taking Grace. Madeline requests her to give my daughter back to me. But she disagrees. She strikes a hammer on her head. As a result, she has fallen. Then Madeline cuts her throat as she comes near her. And she breaks her head, hitting the same hammer. Meanwhile, that nurse midwife approaches there because she was worrying about Madeline. She becomes evident of all and in the end, that nurse midwife is going somewhere with Madeline and her pet cat. Madeline had weakened while Grace was in the teething process. She has started to eat the flesh with the sucking of blood. Grace's blood was drawn with the assistance of a nurse midwife. Finally, it is revealed that Grace has begun to eat Madeline's flesh. After that day she will eat other people's flesh to quench her hunger. The movie ends here. Thanks for watching and make sure to subscribe as it motivates us to keep uploading.